When I became a mother, I thought I had found the purest kind of love. The kind that would never fade, never turn cruel, never demand more than it gave. I spent years believing that no matter what the world took from me, my daughter would always be my home. But I was wrong. The day she told me to leave if I didn't start pulling my weight, I felt something inside me shatter. I had imagined many endings to my life, but none where the child I raised with trembling hands would look at me with eyes that cold. "Mom," she said, her tone sharp, practiced as if she'd been rehearsing it. "I can't afford to carry you anymore. You live here for free, you don't work, you just exist. Either start helping out properly, or go." For a moment I thought she was joking. I even laughed softly, trying to catch her eye, hoping to see a trace of warmth there. But her expression didn't change. Her arms were crossed, her lips thin. She meant every word. "Her name is Claire. My only child. The reason I once woke up every day and fought through exhaustion, loneliness, and hunger. I raised her after her father left us when she was 6. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to make sure she had what she needed. When she cried, I held her. When she succeeded, I stood in the crowd and clapped until my hands went numb. And now at 63, she was telling me that my worth had an expiration date. I packed that night. Quietly. Slowly. Each movement felt like a betrayal, not of her but of myself. The photo of her first day of school, the silver bracelet she made for me when she was 8, the scarf I knitted her last Christmas. I touched them all but took none. Just a coat, my purse, and my aching heart. When I closed the door behind me, I half expected her to call out to stop me. She didn't. The silence was heavier than any words could have been. For the next few nights, I stayed in a church shelter downtown. The cots were narrow, the air cold, but no one judged me there. Everyone carried their own kind of grief. I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, asking myself when love had turned into debt. When had my motherhood become a service to be measured and priced? One morning while helping in the kitchen, one of the nuns noticed my hands trembling as I washed dishes. She asked if I'd ever worked with children. I told her I'd raised one. She smiled gently and said, "Then you have experience in miracles." That same week, she helped me get a position at a small children's care home. They needed someone patient, someone who knew what it meant to give without expecting much in return. The first day, a little boy named Oliver ran to me, clutching a broken toy car. "Can you fix it?" he asked, eyes wide. His trust was immediate, unearned, and pure. I knelt down and smiled. "I'll try my best." By the end of the week, the car still didn't run, but he didn't care. He sat beside me every evening as if he'd known me forever. And slowly, I began to remember what love felt like before it demanded anything back. Days turned into weeks. The ache inside me dulled. I still thought of Claire, but the pain no longer crushed me. Instead, it floated, distant, softened by the laughter of children who had so little yet gave so much. Then one afternoon, as the sun spilled through the dusty windows, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in months. "Mom." I turned. Claire stood there, pale and thinner than I remembered. Her eyes were red, her expression uncertain, like someone standing at the edge of an old wound. For a long moment, neither of us moved. "I didn't know where else to go," she said finally. "I lost my job. The bills, the rent, it's too much. I thought I could do it all, but..." She swallowed, her voice cracking. "I was wrong. I should have felt satisfaction, vindication, some quiet, bitter triumph that the child who had cast me out now needed me again. But all I felt was sorrow, not for myself but for her. Because I saw in her face the same exhaustion that once haunted mine. Without a word, I guided her to a chair. She sat down, staring at her hands. "I don't deserve your kindness," she whispered. "Maybe not," I said gently. "But you're still my daughter." Tears filled her eyes. I was cruel. I thought I was being practical, responsible. I thought love had to be efficient. "I forgot how much you gave me." "You didn't forget," I said softly. "You just stopped remembering." She looked up at me then, truly looked, and for the first time in years I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who ran to me when she was scared of thunderstorms. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling. "Can I make it right?" I smiled faintly. "That's what life is for, second chances. But you'll have to work for it." And she did. She began visiting the care home every week, helping with the children, cleaning, reading bedtime stories. At first, the staff didn't believe she'd keep showing up. But she did. The more time she spent there, the more the hardness in her began to melt. I watched her laugh again, a real laugh, not the polite, tired one she used to give. She learned the children's names, their quirks, their fears. Sometimes she'd glance at me across the room, and our eyes would meet. There was no need for words. The forgiveness was already there, quiet and unconditional. One evening, after the children had fallen asleep, Claire and I walked outside. The air was warm and fireflies danced in the tall grass. "Do you ever hate me for what I did?" she asked suddenly. I shook my head. "No. Pitied you. You thought independence meant isolation. But love doesn't weaken us, Claire. It roots us." She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. I was so lost. "And yet," I said, touching her hand, "you found your way back." For a moment she stood in silence, then leaned her head on my shoulder, something she hadn't done since she was a child. I closed my eyes and let the moment sink into my heart. We stayed like that, mother and daughter under a quiet sky, surrounded by the laughter that once saved us both. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel like someone's burden. I felt like home. The sound of the night surrounded us, soft crickets, the distant hum of the city, and the quiet rhythm of our breathing. I felt the warmth of Claire's head on my shoulder, something so small yet so immense that my chest ached with the weight of it. The fireflies shimmered in the tall grass like scattered memories, fleeting, glowing, impossible to hold but impossible to forget. We stood there for a long time, neither of us speaking. It was as though words might shatter the fragile peace we'd found. For years, silence between us had been sharp, cutting, full of blame. But this silence was different. It was healing. When Claire finally spoke, her voice was soft, uncertain. "I keep thinking about all those nights when you stayed up for me. You'd wait by the door until I got home from work, even when I told you not to. I used to get annoyed. I thought you didn't trust me." I smiled faintly, still looking ahead. "I wasn't waiting to see if you'd come home, Claire. I just wanted to make sure the world didn't take you before morning." Her fingers tightened around my hand. "And I threw you out of my house." I didn't answer right away. The truth didn't need to be spoken. We both knew it. But after a moment I turned to her and said quietly, "You can spend your whole life punishing yourself, or you can spend it becoming better. I prefer the latter." She looked at me then with tears glimmering in her eyes, but this time they didn't fall. She just nodded, as though she was finally ready to start living with what she had done instead of hiding from it. In the weeks that followed, she began to change in ways I never imagined. She started cooking with the children, sitting on the floor with them, letting them braid her hair and cover her in paint during art sessions. Her laughter echoed through the hallways of the care home, and the children adored her. They clung to her like tiny sunbeams, and for once she didn't push them away. Sometimes I'd stand by the doorway and just watch her. How she crouched down to listen, how her eyes softened when she spoke to them. She didn't know I was looking, and I didn't tell her. I didn't want to interrupt the miracle quietly unfolding before me. One afternoon as I was folding blankets, one of the older boys, David, came to me and whispered, "Miss Claire said you're her mom. Is that true?" "Yes," I said, smiling. "She's my daughter." He nodded thoughtfully. "She's different from before. She used to look sad. Now she laughs like she means it." That night, I told Claire what he'd said. She went quiet for a moment, then whispered, "Maybe this is where I was meant to end up. Not the house, not the job, here. Maybe it's where you were meant to begin again," I said. A month later, the care home organized a small event for the children. A fair with music, games, and food. Claire volunteered to help run it, and I could see the pride in her face as she moved through the crowd, guiding, laughing, fixing small problems before anyone else noticed. At one point, a little girl tugged on her sleeve and handed her a wilted flower. Claire took it, smiling through tears, and I saw her glance at me from across the yard. The same expression she had the day she took her first steps, uncertain but full of wonder. Later that evening, after everyone had gone, she found me sitting under the big oak tree outside. "Do you remember when we used to come to the park every Sunday?" she asked. "You'd pack sandwiches and tell me stories. How could I forget?" I said. "You'd always ask for 2 stories, one happy, one sad." She laughed softly. "I think I understand why you did that now. Life is both, isn't it? You can't have one without the other. Yes, I said, looking at her. But it's not the sadness that defines us, Claire. It's what we do with it. She leaned back against the tree, her eyes tracing the stars above. Sometimes I wish I could undo everything I said to you. I reached out and took her hand. You can't undo, my dear. But you can outgrow. And that's far more powerful. A cool breeze passed through the branches, carrying with it the faint scent of lilacs from the garden nearby. It felt like the world itself was exhaling, calm, forgiving, alive. From that day on, Claire never stopped showing up. Even when life got busy, she always came. And every time she did, she brought something new. A book for the children, fresh fruit, or just her laughter. It was as though she was rebuilding something invisible between us, one act of kindness at a time. There were still moments when pain tried to return. Small shadows from the past. But now they didn't linger. They came and they went like clouds passing through sunlight. One evening, I caught her sitting by herself in the playroom after everyone had left. Her eyes were distant, lost in thought. I walked over quietly and she smiled when she saw me. I was just thinking, she said. All my life I thought love was a transaction, something to be earned, something to balance. I treated you like a debt I didn't want to pay. But now I realize, love isn't a debt. It's a gift that keeps coming back when you least deserve it. Her words filled the room like music. I wanted to tell her how proud I was, how I'd waited so long to hear her say something like that. But I didn't. I just placed a hand on her shoulder and smiled. Some things don't need to be spoken. They're understood in the quiet. The care home began to feel like our shared heart, a place where our brokenness had found purpose. Every wall held a story. Every laugh reminded us that healing wasn't a moment but a rhythm, a steady pulse of choosing love again and again. And though I never said it aloud, I knew that in helping those children, Claire wasn't just saving them. She was saving herself and perhaps in a way saving me too. Because every day when she smiled across the room, I no longer saw the woman who told me to leave. I saw my daughter, the little girl I once carried through sleepless nights, now carrying me in her own quiet way. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning, the kind that begins with soft sunlight pouring through the windows and the scent of rain still hanging in the air. The care home was unusually still. The children were sleeping in, their toys scattered across the floor like remnants of dreams. I sat by the window with a cup of tea watching the world wake up when Claire joined me. She looked peaceful, her hair tied loosely, a small smile resting on her lips. Do you ever think about the past? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Every day, I said. But it doesn't hurt like it used to. The past has softened its edges. She nodded slowly, then glanced at the children's drawings pinned on the wall, crude sketches of suns, trees, and stick-figure families. Her eyes lingered on one in particular, a picture of a woman holding a child's hand beneath a rainbow. They see family in everything, she murmured, even when they've lost it. I looked at her and smiled faintly. Maybe because children believe in love more than we do. They haven't learned to be afraid of it yet. Claire turned to me then, her eyes shimmering with the same tenderness I had once known so well. I used to think love was supposed to be perfect, she said. That it meant never arguing, never failing, never disappointing anyone. But now I think love is what survives when everything else fails. The messy parts, the broken pieces, they're the proof it's real. There was a quiet moment after that, and in it I felt something shift, something invisible but powerful. The space between us, once heavy with resentment and regret, had transformed into understanding. It wasn't just forgiveness anymore. It was connection, deep and unbreakable. She reached for my hand, her touch trembling. You know, she whispered. Sometimes I still hear that night in my head, the night I told you to leave. I wish I could erase it. I squeezed her fingers gently. If you erased that night, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have learned what it means to find our way back. Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of guilt anymore. They were the kind that come when someone finally lays down a burden they've carried too long. The door creaked open then, and little Oliver stumbled in, rubbing his eyes. Miss Claire, he mumbled sleepily, can you make pancakes again? She laughed softly, brushing away her tears. Of course, sweetheart. But only if you promise to eat your fruit first. He nodded and ran off, his bare feet slapping against the wooden floor. Claire stood and looked at me. See? I've become you, she said with a grin. Always negotiating breakfast like it's a business deal. Then you've learned well, I said, smiling back. That morning we cooked side by side, me stirring the batter, her flipping the pancakes with exaggerated care while the children gathered around, their laughter filling the air. It felt like a small piece of heaven stitched together from our broken pasts. After breakfast, Claire took the children outside to play. I stayed by the door watching her chase them through the yard, her laughter mingling with theirs. She moved freely now, no weight on her shoulders, no shadow in her eyes. It struck me then that people don't always need redemption to change. Sometimes they just need space to remember who they were before the world hardened them. When she came back in, her cheeks were flushed, her hair messy, and she looked younger, not by years but by spirit. She sat down beside me and rested her head against my shoulder. Mom, she said softly, I've been saving money. I found a small house near here. It's nothing fancy, 2 rooms, a little garden, but I want us to live there. Together. I turned to her, caught off guard. Claire, you don't have to. I know, she interrupted gently. But I want to. I don't want to repay you. I just want to share something good with you for once. Not because I owe it, but because I finally understand how much I need you. Her words struck me harder than any apology could have. For years I had prayed for her to see me, not as a burden, not as a ghost from her past, but as her mother. And in that moment she did. We moved into that little house 2 months later. It was old, creaky, and smelled faintly of pine and dust. But it was ours. We filled it with laughter, books, and the aroma of home-cooked meals. The children from the care home often visited, running through the garden like wildflowers come to life. And sometimes, when the evenings grew quiet, Claire and I would sit on the porch and watch the sky fade from gold to indigo. She'd talk about her plans, studying child psychology, starting a program for orphans, building something lasting out of her second chance. And I would listen, proud and humbled, thinking how strange and beautiful it was that the daughter who once cast me out had now built me a new home. One night, as the stars shimmered above us, she turned to me and said, You know, Mom, I think every life is a story, and maybe the cruelest chapters aren't there to break us. They're there to make us grateful for the gentle ones that follow. I looked at her, tears burning behind my eyes, and whispered, Then this must be our gentle chapter. She smiled. No, she said softly, this is our beginning. In the glow of the porch light I saw it, the reflection of everything we had lost and everything we had rebuilt. The love that had once been fractured now shone with a quiet, powerful brilliance. Sometimes late at night I still think about that evening when she told me to leave. I remember the sound of the door closing, the silence that followed, and the ache that seemed endless. But now when I think of it, it doesn't hurt. It feels like a story that belonged to someone else. Someone who walked through fire just to find light on the other side. And maybe that's what motherhood truly is. Not a duty, not a debt, but an unyielding faith that love, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way home. Claire sits beside me now, reading to the children as the sun sets behind her. Her voice is calm, warm, alive. I watch her, and in her smile, I see the little girl who once reached for my hand, and the woman who found her way back to it. In the soft twilight of that moment, I realize that I am no longer the mother who was cast out. I am the mother who was found again. And that, after all the years, all the pain, all the silence, is the greatest gift love could ever give.